I'm John Travis in Novato, California on the 5th of August 2020, talking to Elson Haas in Sebastopol, just up the road in California. And I'm always envious of that hair of yours, man.
Yeah, thank you.
It's real, I found out. And
For
I'm
all my
going to
life.
begin with finding out who you are and why, beginning with your birth and family life
Hmm.
and your education, and what led you to do the work that you've chosen to do.
Well, I was born in 1947, so I'm going to be 73 in another week, and feeling pretty good. I've been following a healthier path than my family did, growing up in Detroit. Through the 50s, which was the processed food, Wonder Bread and sodas, and all kinds of junk that my family embraced, and I was the middle child and kind of the family garbage can because we didn't like to waste food. So they said, "Oh, Elson will finish that," So I was overweight at 6, 7 years old, and very athletic, but still, I had a belly on me, and I've worked on that my entire life. So the last 65 years or so, I've been having to work to maintain a healthy weight, and that's one of the things I teach about detox and health. So did well in school, went to University of Michigan for undergrad, and then I jumped into medical school after my third year, because they asked me, I had good grades, and they said, "Oh, we're trying out a new program. You don't need to graduate college. You can just come into med school as long as you have your requirements ready." So, and then I did, and I was in med school from 68 to 72. So as I say, the times that were changing. So I was starting to hear a little, I was kind of a rebel medical student, the 68 class. We came in after the summer of 68 with, probably 25 out of the 200 people were freaks, hippie. My hair was long, I had a beard, a few, afros, and more women. It was the first time we had like more than 10% women in a med school class. And it
Tell me
was
how you got to be a long hair. What led to your
well, I was coming out to California. I was like, it was that I was protesting the war. I realized that I was a pacifist at one level. I actually became a conscientious objector and went through a whole process there. I write about in an article I just wrote called "Politics, Medicine, and War," which is about how we use an attack and conquer approach in politics and medicine and agriculture and food production and all that. So it's about how do we take a different approach. So
well, let's go back to your earlier childhood. Like, were you a rebellious kid from the start, or were you
no, I
quiet
was
in
well
school?
behaved. I stayed out of trouble, but the times were rebellious. I
Uh,
mean, the times that were changing, as I said, and um, we were in the streets protesting the Vietnam War. I was hanging out with a bunch of long hairs. People were smoking pot, back in the '60s, and as I was, and
and
it
this
kind
was
of
in
opened up
Detroit.
a little bit, and a little bit of psychedelics, although I didn't really like him that much, but that this opened up. I was studying medicine, and actually I was working and actually directing the Ann Arbor Free Clinic, which was one of the first free clinics in the country beside Haight-Ashbury. And we were teaching people about empowering people to be their best doctors. So that's what I started there. So it was more of a people's doctor. Then I was writing an article called The Barefoot Doctor, and it's like, how do we keep people healthy? So that was while I was in medical school.
And
And
what led you to consider medicine? How early was that decision?
well, my mom tells me I went to she took me to a dermatologist. I had a couple warts on my fingers, so she took me to this fancy Ford hospital, and I was in this big clinic, and they put some stuff on me and wrapped my fingers up, and then I came back a week later, and they were triple the size. So my mom, she grabbed me and said, "Okay, we're out of here," and then she took me to a private dermatologist who put some purple stuff on it, and basically, and then my follow. So then I got better, and then my follow up, yeah, and I said, "Wow." He's just like, I said, "I could," I said, he doesn't work on Wednesdays, and all he has to do is just look at people's skin. I said, "Yeah, I could be a doctor." So I was probably 10 years old then, So that was the first time. But I had a knack for science and bodies, and I had a little red wagon. I was doing checkups, when I was probably 8 years old with my neighbors and stuff.
And you had your own red wagon for a
Yeah, I had my
mobile
little red
clinic?
wagon. I did house calls. So, so I've been, so yeah, and so it was just the time. So by 72, when I got, when I was finishing med school, I said, well, I could go. So I was coming out to California in the summer a little bit. I was also my folks. I was part of the family business. We had a grocery store in Detroit. So I would work that, but I'd get a couple of weeks off, and I could go out to California. And I was hanging out in Berkeley and in San Francisco, and going to Muir Beach and seeing all the naked people. And I says, wow, this is like, compared to, Michigan's pretty beautiful too, but California was the place to be. So when I interned, I said, okay, I'm going to go, I want to move to Berkeley. I'll intern at Highland Hospital. So I did a year of kind of a rotating internship, which was available then. So at 25, when was it? 73, I finished my intern. Yeah. So I was 25 and I was out. I was out as a doctor. I had a general practice, profession, and I started working the VD clinics for the city of Berkeley and the county of Alameda at the beginning of the herpes epidemic. So I was seeing all these kids, with the new VD, and then I was studying medical astrology and looking at all kinds of metaphysical things. So I was interested in that. And then my friend Marty Rossman, who who was a med school, he was a couple years older than me. So he was kind of like my big brother out here, a mentor. He said, and he was working out in Bolinas at it was called the Bolinas Headlands Healing Service, sponsored by the Presbyterian Church, to study healing in a rural setting. So he said, come on, I'm doing some really cool things out here. My mentor, Irving Oil, is, a pretty trippy guy. So I went out there, and, they were basically doing sound. We were studying sound, ultrasound, and acupuncture together as a way of relaxing and helping people go deeper. And also we were we started to do guided imagery. This was 1973.
Yeah.
So we would basically, the treatment we did, this is how we were kind of, quote, studying healing. Your treatment is to go home and 15 minutes, 3 times a day, you sit quietly, close your eyes, and you visualize whatever's happening in its healed state. Okay, so I remember one of my first patients was an elder woman who was like, I can't, she had arthritis in her shoulders and her arms, and she couldn't, take care of her plants in her greenhouse. So she pictured herself taking her water container and watering her plants in the greenhouse, hanging plants in the greenhouse. So she came back a couple of weeks later, and she was feeling better. And she was actually had a little more movement. The next patient I had, which is interesting for, more of the future, this lady who came in who had these really dry, painful fingertips. And so I said, okay, I want you to visualize, your blood vessels relaxing in your hands. Basically, you just think there's not enough blood and warmth and nutrition going through her fingers, so they're starting to break down. So she pictured her hands getting warm, the blood vessels opening, and her fingertips getting nice and healed. So she came back a few weeks later, and her fingers looked much better. It's great. I said, cool, this is something. And I'm just observing this. And she says, and by the way, I was having 3 or 4 migraine headaches a week. I didn't tell you about that, but I haven't had any since I've been doing this. Mm. And so I called up Art Gladman, who is a medical doctor, director.
I knew Art, yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, biofeedback at Claremont Hotel in Berkeley. I said, well, what's anything about this? He says, that's really cool, Elson, because we're finding that the way, when people have headaches, their autonomic nervous system is up. They have too much heat. We check, kids' temperatures because the forehead is supposed to be cooler than the rest of the body. Keeps the brain from frying, So he says, yes, we're finding out that you improve headaches if you learn to warm your fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
So that was cool. So these things. So, and Marty Rossman had already studied Chinese medicine and was doing acupuncture. And so we had charts on the wall with the meridians. And when we were doing ultrasound and sonopuncture, we were treating certain points based on the conditions people had. So we'd come up with that. So I really started to study Chinese medicine. And, you know, I never went to acupuncture school per se, but I had all the books to study, and Marty was teaching. And so then, we kind of disbanded the healing service, and I had my own little practice out in, you know, Bolinas, California, which was, you know, really a beautiful, you know, place to be. And I was doing individual sessions, usually an hour session, where I would talk to people about their issues. I was already starting to look at nutrition a little bit, you know, before I got into juice cleansing and, you know, my whole path.
Now,
And
when I met Marty, he and Irving were upstairs, I think, over a store in Stinson.
I read that. I think that's not, I think Marty was up there. He was doing that. Or he wasn't, Irving, we were working in Bolinas. I don't think Irving worked in Simpson Beach.
Well, they
But
were
Marty
together,
had
and I could have sworn it was. I went over to Bolinas, and I met Mike Samuels at his house on that
Right.
same trip. But I was sure Marty was upstairs with Irving.
They might have been. That was before I got there. When I got there, Marty he still had his practice in Simpson Beach doing acupuncture, but he also worked with Irving and I in the clinic, and we would hang out. We, you know, basically we worked from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. You know, sometimes Irving would throw a few tarot cards before, and then we'd have those energies kind of come in the door. You know, so we didn't really have appointments. People would just show up. Hey, can you help me? I have this or that. So. Anyway, so that was, you know, part of it. So my interest in traditional Chinese medicine, you know, came forth from that. And I was doing, and also I had, you know, during my training at Highland Hospital, the head of the emergency room is a converted osteopath. So he did a lot of structural medicine. So when I had people coming in with back pain or neck pain, he would show me how to treat them. So I had training and hands-on, you know, body work and, you know, body alignment. And that's really been part of my path for the last 50 years too. So
What's a converted osteopath? Converted from
back in whatever year it was, 1960 or 65, all the DOs, because there was this dichotomy between MDs and DOs, they just said, okay, all DOs are part of the medical system now. And, you know, so they kind of dealt with that confrontation between the MDs and DOs. Now, currently, I mean, I've had an osteopath working with me in my clinic, you know, in San Rafael for all of the last 40 years that I've had my, you know, my preventive medical center, I call it. So I think structural medicine, structural health is really an important part.
Yeah.
Most people are, you know, they have old injuries, they have patterns, they have stress patterns in their body, you know, that are also connected psycho-emotionally to their lives. So, you know, when we're talking about healing, we're talking about, you know, body, mind, spirit, you know, emotional state, you know, so, you know, we really look at, you know, that's, and my questionnaire goes in there. But anyway, my work for 5 or 6 years in Bolinas and then Fairfax was based on this, you know, what I was trained in, and then also what we did at the healing center. I was doing body work and sound and acupuncture. I shifted from the ultrasound. I said, I don't want to use the wall. I don't want to plug in and do electrical stuff. So I got a bunch of tuning forks that were in different notes, and I would apply those to the acupuncture points. That's become popular in the last, you know, 10, 20 years. But, you know, I really started doing that, you know, sonopuncture, I called it. And so I did that, and that would, you know, when you put a pure vibration into the energy paths of the body, it starts to clear things, and people started to get really centered and relaxed and deep. And at that point, then I would sit next to them and say, okay, let's have you go to a quiet place. let's have you just kind of relax, and you may have somebody come join you there. You know, it might be could be um, a senior, it could be a wise one, it could be a ball of light, it could be a little baby squirrel, it could be anything. Okay, and you can ask them if they know about your health issue. This is what Marty and Irving and I developed, and Marty really kind of came forth with and has been teaching for the last decades, guided imagery work. And we would have a conversation about their question about their health issues, and we'd get some kind of solutions, and usually they were wise. So I have all these cards that I took notes on, because I would be sitting very intimately with someone and just talking to them about what's going on inside. And and I kind of have followed up with that a bit in my recent book, on healing, called Staying Healthy with New Medicine, NEW. The NEW stands for Natural, Eastern, and Western Medicines, which has been really the focus of my career, of how do we take these three valuable systems and use their strengths to work with them. And part of my philosophy is lifestyle first, natural therapies next, drugs last. So I always start with, like, can this individual do something differently, eat differently, exercise, stretch differently, deal with stress or sleep differently, and create healing that way. And to me, that whole integrative medicine approach is, to me, the best way to reduce the beginning of high blood pressure, early diabetes, high cholesterol, and all that. So that's, to me, where the strength of integrative medicine has been great.
I'm curious, historically, back in the 70s, we were hearing about David Bressler and his pain clinic, and I know he and Marty, I don't know when they got connected, forgotten if you did tell me that. And I haven't interviewed David yet, he's on my list.
Yeah, that's a little mid to later 70s, I think they connected.
And then Emmett Miller was doing guided imagery and making tapes down in
well, and the interesting thing was, that same time, 73-4, Carl Simonton was using guided imagery, or imagery, visualization, for treating cancer. We're going to see your white blood cells as shining knights, horseback, going and killing the cancer cells and carrying them out. Or there'd be little Pac-Man cells that came later. So that was, to me, all those things. So if we look at it differently, Doc, then we're looking at this whole, what was happening. The mind was expanding. We're dealing almost 50 years later from this now, and we're seeing that you and I can talk and have a conversation recorded, and anybody in the world could see it, tomorrow. And to me, it's an evolution of consciousness. Part of it's based on the drug experience, but I even wrote in my first book, Staying Healthy with the Seasons, that the interest in Eastern philosophy and meditation and everything came out of the people's use of drugs in this culture, to realize, wow, I can see things differently, I feel things differently. And they say, I don't want to do it, I don't want to have to take drugs to experience this unity with the world, how we're all connected. I want to do it naturally. So
and have Ram Dass and meditation and
yeah, exactly.
The other issue, I just slipped my mind. We're talking about Emmett and senior moment.
Carl Simonton and guided imagery.
Oh yeah, it was Carl Simonton. Because I ran into Art Gladman again. He was one of the first people I saw, and that's why I went into biofeedback. I had some of the earliest autogenic systems units in my center, but Art got involved with Bob Monroe's Journeys Out of the Body, and I actually did a weekend with him and the person that was doing these trainings, because he was concerned about the war model that Simonton was using and the attack, as opposed to the harmony model that he thought that Monroe did a better job of. And then, of course,
so I agree, and that's what I just wrote. I think one of the, I've considered myself, based on kind of traditional Chinese medicine, a philosopher physician. I'm always looking at what's the key here. And what I just wrote, this 20-page article first do no harm, basically, from politics, medicine, and war to integrity, healing, and peace. So how do we, and right now we're dealing with, COVID-19 and the whole approach that people are having. How do we fight this disease? How do we kill the virus? How do we do that? And it's really a different
It's the
approach.
old germ theory of
Right.
Pasteur's compared to the terrain model.
The real question is, how do I keep my body strong? How do I
Yeah.
keep my immune system there? So I was doing, I did a juice cleanse back in 1975, which I do every year for at least 10 days. I think that's really helped keep my health and vitality together. So I started doing my group on March 21st, and I realized we just got sheltered in place and we just had all this COVID. I said, doing a 10-day juice cleanse is a little too intense right now for people. So I shifted my online teaching program to called Immune Protection and Spring Health. So we talk about, how to stay in tune with the season, but also we just really supported that. I had my associate, PhD doc, Sandra Barrett, who wrote a book called Secret of Your Cells, and was a cancer a biochemist in San Francisco at UCSF. And so she was kind of my co-teacher for some of the classes, really looking at how the immune system. Actually, I wrote a book with her called Ultimate Immunity. So it's all about immune system, and when your immune system gets underactive, you get sick more easily. When it gets overactive, you get allergies, autoimmune issues. So there's a guidance and a misguidance here that happens, which is true for almost every system of the body.
Mm. Now, at what point did you, going back to your professional evolution, you said you were working in Fairfax over in West Marin?
I'll give you a short story here. So I was studying all through the 70s. I was studying, traditional Chinese medicine as well as Western medicine. I was doing a lot of nutrition study. I would see people, and I would, when I took on a family or a new patient, I required a short house call, and I would look in their refrigerator and their cupboards and see, okay, what are you all eating? So I started to get into nutrition that way. And I was already, we had the whole 70s was the back to nature movement, okay? Natural foods started coming around. Health food started to expand. I said, we eat for, and that's, all right. So anyways, and I was studying all this stuff. So my folks didn't understand what I was doing. They had helped me get through med school, without much debt. And, they said, what are you doing, Elson? I was working in Bolinas. I was trading for, a pottery or chickens and eggs, and, was making like, $5,000 a year, and so I said, okay, I'm going to write a book. And I had met my longtime, now longtime associate, Bethany Argyle, who worked for the LA Times and was a kind of an editor, great thinker. So she said, okay, well, let's, so I started writing. I said, I want to be, she said, what do you want to be when you grow up, Elson? I said, I want to be an author. I want to be a teacher. And I want to be a pioneer in healthcare delivery. She said, okay, well, I'll help you. So I started writing about seasons. I started writing, like, say, spring, spring health. And at that time, which is what, 77 maybe, we would print, remember mimeographs?
Oh, yeah.
We would print, maybe 50 or 100 of my articles on spring or summer or autumn in different colors. So we use green for spring and red for summer. And I would send them around the country by US mail with to family and friends and, doctors that I knew and all that. And people say, this is cool. You should, develop this more. So I met Bethany brought to dinner one night. She met him overlooking San Francisco and the Bolinas Bay, a man named Hal Kramer, who ran Celestial Arts Publishing and was doing a lot of posters and all that. She says, well, he had just sold the company. And so he said, well, let me introduce you to the editor down there. So I gave him my writing, and he said, well, we like it, but it's not ready yet. So I borrowed some money from a friend. I hired an editor, and I developed this process. And from that came Staying Healthy with the Seasons. Okay, 1981 it came out. So soon it's going to have 40th year anniversary. I am teaching a year-long course starting September 12th on the message here. So it's a physical, metaphysical book. It deals with energy, and it's just got, so it's been in print and popular for 40 years, John. So, I'm excited about that. And you had the same publisher with Wellness Workbook.
Well, actually, it was 10 Speed Press before they bought
Right.
Celestial, and it was 81, the exact same year,
Right.
June of 81.
Yeah, well, that's when we connected. I said, Wellness Workbook, you're happening, guy.
Well,
So anyway,
now from Fairfax, I remember I kept hearing your name. We bumped into each other at some meetings, I think, but we didn't really have, I was shutting down the Wellness Center, moved to Costa Rica in 1980. So when did you actually get shifted over to San Rafael and open your?
well, all right. So I came to Fairfax. So when the book was about ready to come out, I said, I need to be, Bolinas is like another world. I said, I need to be in civilization again. So I moved to Fairfax and rented this house and had my own private practice. Now I did a barefoot doctor practice at that time. I had a nice brochure. I charged people like $375 for the year. That included an initial visit and then seasonal sessions to kind of stay in tune with the cycles of life. If people got sick and they were following my guidance, or their guidance, I would treat them for free. If they weren't following, my advice and they were coming back with problems, usually if they weren't following it, they were probably not coming back. But then I would charge them additional amounts. So I saw, and that was before was I taking insurance or Medi-Cal then? So anyway, I was just, so I had that kind of idealistic approach. And then I did that for a couple of years, and that I met these guys who had a group of clinics called Holistic Medical Group, one of the first things. And it was a little bit of a, money machine kind of program, but I started working with them on a daily, on a per diem basis. And then they tried to go big and turned it into a big corporation. And then they started to fail because they all wanted.
Who were they? I don't remember anything like that.
There was Barry Saltzman and Richard Kaplan and Jerry Stewart. Yeah, they were all DOs. It was interesting. They were all DOs, so they did some structural stuff. So anyways, long story short, I did that for about a year and a half, and then they weren't able to pay me. So I just said, I got Bethany and a lawyer friend involved, and I said, hey, you just have to turn this practice over to him because you guys are at a loss and you can't abandon all these patients. So I basically, I started it, I paid them $1. I took over their accounts receivable, their accounts payable, and, enlisted the staff that was there. And I've been
where was this?
This was still at my previous place that I moved from a few years ago in Lucas Valley Road area. It was on Mitchell Boulevard. So I was in that office for 35 years before I had some, kind of environmental issues there, and I decided to move. So I had that practice, and I've had a lot of good docs, a lot of docs I've helped start out. But one of the unique things, John, is that I've been one of the probably few or only integrative docs or alternative docs, to take insurance and Medicare. And I've had to find a way to do that so that, because I can't, it's very different than a doc saying, oh yeah, I'm going to see you for 2 hours and it's, $500 or $1,000 and it's cash only. And, there's most of the alternative docs around that. But I actually, when I first was doing my stuff and even talking about nutrition, I gave my first talk at the College of Marin in their cancer series. And I was the one who gave a talk in 1979 on prevention of cancer. So I was looking at mind body stuff and nutrition and all that. Now we could say that, we know that 50% or more of cancers are lifestyle based, so, so I started to do that. And, that was even before my books came out, so I realized that, educating people was my path. I started to tune into the word, the word doctor comes from Latin docere, which means teacher.
Mhm.
So, I tell people, even yesterday, I saw, a couple of new patients, and I said, I require healthcare for me needs to be fun and educational. Yeah, it's different if somebody's come in and they're suffering, it's not so much fun at that time. But, I do a lot of, wellness evaluations, and a lot of, a third or more of my work is clerical, ordering lab tests, prescriptions, pre-authorizing drugs to get covered by insurance company, because I got a good team of people that really helps, facilitate all that. So, it takes working with good people to get good things done, I think.
Mhm. Well, back to what was going on in Marin in the 70s. Like I was in Mill Valley 75 to 80, and I originally was going to go in with um, Milton Estes and Jeff Anderson.
Uh-huh.
And then decided to go on my, then there was Rich Shames at that point, now Shamus, the
Uh-huh.
Holistic Health and Nutrition
Yeah,
Institute.
he's one of my current associates now. He
Right.
specializes in
He's,
thyroid, and
yeah,
yeah, and he's written some nice books too. So yeah.
there was him. And then Bob Belknap was down the street. He was doing more conventional medicine, but when I saw him, he took my pulses. He knew
Yeah,
some
yeah.
Eastern medicine. I'd run into Don Fink over at San Francisco General. And then Jerry Jampolsky invited me out for lunch and started telling me about this miracle stuff. And I thought, oh no,
Uh,
boy, I'm wrong on that
well,
one.
it's good though. It's good stuff though.
It was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was the hotbed of, as Tom Ferguson said, if you throw a dead cat over your shoulder in Marin, you're likely to hit a holistic health center,
Mhm.
which is a little
Uh,
exaggerated,
I
but
used to tell people, I said that, like, especially in Marin, I said, if you're not getting chiropractic, acupuncture, massage, which is like 1 out of every 3 people in the county is doing, you're not supporting your community. So go out and get some treatments.
yeah. Then there's Peter Pick and what's his partner that were in Mill Valley doing
Stephen
polarity
Steve,
work.
Steve, Stephen Shim.
Steve Shim, yeah, I'm going to track them down. I hear they're
They
up
were
in
doing they
Petaluma.
were doing a lot of body work and polarity therapy and all that stuff. So there's
Yeah.
so many things. It was just so rich in all that. That's why I said I'm going to take all the things I'm studying through the 70s and put them into my book. So I was writing about chakras and energy meridians, uh,
Uh-huh.
and colors, and but also real basic stuff like, how do the Chinese understand sexual activity, or what, eating seasonally has to do with counteracting the hot climate when you're eating cooling foods, and the cold climate when you're eating warm foods, and eating from nature and get back to nature, and that whole message. So, it's so the simplest message. One of your people we've interviewed is Patrick Hanaway, who's a friend of mine, and he said, Elson, he said, he was in med school, he read Staying Healthy with the Seasons. He said, that touched me so deeply. It was such a simple concept, and it's really the most important nutritional concept that we have. So, he just kind of acknowledged me for that, because
Mm.
it's still essential. And my career is always about stay connected to the cycles of life, your own cycles, your nature, and and figure out what's going on within you. I think healing still happens when we do our own soul searching, and um, and come up with our answers. So in my new medicine book, which I didn't bring a copy over here, Staying Healthy with New Medicine, which is available on Amazon, is, I have this whole section on, when you don't understand, or your doctor doesn't know how to address your issues, you use your dreams. When you go to sleep at night, say, write down, have a journal there, write down, body, what's going on? What are you trying to tell me? What's needed for healing? And ask your dreams to show you, give you some insight. And it's amazing the kinds of things that people come up with, because there's a lot of medical problems that Western medicine doesn't address well, that, even natural and, Eastern medicine don't. You have to really sort it out yourself, because it's all part of our own evolution. To me, disease is conflict. Disease is our resistance to the change and growth and evolution that we're all here to experience. And when we embrace that, Healing is change. So we have to, look at that. So, and one of the things I teach in my classes is, how do we change? How do we make the difference in our diet and getting rid of our habits? And, and one of the most common problems I see, I know Irv Katz, who you interviewed also, is that, it's all psycho-emotionally based. I call it mood and energy disorders. We have fatigue and depression as kind of a lower energy. We have anxiety and insomnia. Okay. And those are, if you really look at it, those are really four aspects of kind of energy, imbalances, and they're all connected. And so one of the things that I see, one of my earlier books was called The Detox Diet, so I've been teaching about detox and to look at people's habits, like, my questionnaire that I have: how many cups of coffee do you do today? How much sugar do you use? How much, alcohol do you use? Do you use cannabis? Do you use other drugs? All that stuff. There's a syndrome that I've kind of named a few years ago called the stimulation sedation syndrome. And it's where people are using substances to energize themselves and then calm themselves.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't do that in the right balance, we get overstimulated. You're not sleeping well. And then when you don't sleep well, your energy is not so good. So you take more coffee or other stimulants, and so people get burned out on that. And it's like, when they can take a week. So I have a course through my website. I have a course called Regain Your Natural Energy, which is to get away from stimulants instead of, doesn't mean we can't use them. I mean, people love coffee, and there's some benefits. There's benefits and problems to everything, I mean, they have help. So just to kind of take a break from things. So that's kind of my first message in healthcare, is look at your lifestyle and see what can you do differently, so that, and then you see the results. So I know nationally, if we had 10 million people, kind of do an elimination diet and get off of caffeine, alcohol, sugar, wheat, dairy, fried foods, red meat, whatever, it might be half a dozen more things or not, that half of their problems at least would get better, if not totally go away. Many symptoms would go away. People would sleep better. They have better energy. So I've seen this because I've been doing groups, detox programs several times a year for 40 years almost, So, the next couple of years will be 40 years I've been doing that, and I do it myself. And to me, it really revitalizes me, and I see what happens. I have enough thousands of people who I've watched go through these kind of, I'll call it, detox programs, and how they feel and what they learn from it, and how they can change their life so that they improve their health over the next decade or two. Being a preventive medicine doctor, to me, that meant I want to look at how are you living now, and what's that going to do for your health 20 or 30 years from now. And if we want, most people can't change based on, I want to feel better when I'm 75, when they're 40, they're just like, I want to feel better now, so, it's a different game a bit. So how do you motivate people into that process?
Well, curious whether back in the late 70s was when Norm Shealy started the American Holistic Medical Association. And excuse me, don't know whether you were involved in that, what your connections were outside of Marin.
Well, basically, I'm not a joiner of groups too much. I kind of been doing my own thing, and that's why I've been running my own center for 40 years. To me, as people have called me, even Mark Hyman, at a conference, he said, here's one of our pioneers of integrated medicine. I started that word 1982, integrated medicine, I said, because I said, I don't want to be, to me, what I'm doing should be mainstream. It's not alternative. Holistic, yeah. I didn't like, even though I like it more now, because it means more, but there were so many people, oh, that was holistic medicine. Nobody knew what it really meant, other than we were trying to deal with the whole body and whole life. But I said integrated medicine is more, because it's Western and it's all these other things. And I said there's four main differences in that. One is looking at people's whole lives. It's multidisciplinary. It's it's multiple therapeutic, and you ask a different question when you don't feel well. The Western medicine question is, what can I take to make this go away? If I have a headache, what drug should I take? The real question is, why is this present?
Hmm.
Where's this come from? What's the underlying cause? I just did a class that's available on my website also called Understanding Causes of Disease. And on new medicine. And I've been doing these PowerPoints, really beautiful slides, and groups, and I'm getting more and more people coming to these talks, and it's really just simple. How do I empower you to be your own best doctor?
Now I counted three. Have you said what the fourth one was yet?
Oh, three. You did, because I kind of merged them. Um,
They're excellent, by the way.
yeah. So it's a multidisciplinary approach. It's looking at people's whole life, and it's asking a different question.
Yeah.
Another one. Anyway, I have it somewhere.
Well, if it
I'll
comes.
think. I'll think of it.
Now, I'm curious with all of this professional activity, what your personal life was like. Were you a surfer dude on the side, being out there at Stinson, or
No, I'm a frisbeer. Marty and I used to play frisbee a lot on the beach. I've been, I realize, I'm very physically active. I'm not hyperactive. I don't need. I've never had a cup of coffee in my life. I have,
same here?
I actually just had my son. My son Orion is 35, and he's just back from Nepal. He was hiking in Nepal when the earthquake happened. So I've been a dad, for 35 years, and that's
Okay, well,
been.
that implies that you probably had a wife somewhere
I
in
had a
there.
wife, Tara, and we're still really close. We're not together, and then we have a daughter who just got married, Ishara. She's 30. She just got married last year, and so we have a really close family bond. And I've had, different relationships. I'm solo now, but um, I just, I talk to everybody in practice about love and intimacy. And I'm always, I say, I'm not willing to live without intimacy. It's like my motto for my 70s, John, is like, keep love in my heart, say yes whenever I can, but be able to say no. So
Hmm.
that's part of my philosopher approach. So, so raising kids and, living in Sebastopol has been great. Um,
Now, how did you wind up there? When, and how?
we were living out Lucas Valley Road in San Rafael, pretty close to my office, and my son was going to the Waldorf school there.
Uh-huh.
And we just said, Tara said, let's move to the country. So Sebastopol was the country, even though we
Yeah.
were living in nature. Anyway, so we had a friend of ours knew about this house that was going to go on the market, and it was a 5-acre little farm with a granny unit and a eucalyptus grove, and so we made a deal on that, and we moved up there. And then
When
we
was that? The 90s
that was
or?
93.
Uh-huh.
That was 1993. So I've been up here for 27 years.
Uh-huh.
And we sold the farm 15 years ago. I live in a really cool house now, and I do a lot of gardening. I'm outside, and I swim. But I've been athletic. I do physical stuff. I was, remember, before COVID hit, I was working out at 2 gyms. When I see patients all day, on Tuesdays and Thursdays specifically, I go across the freeway to the YMCA, and I either play racquetball or exercise. But I've been doing sports every day of my life. I used to play baseball a lot, and football and tennis. I play racquetball now. I swim. I work out, in a couple gyms now. I'm dancing. To me, dancing is my number one exercise. So I
Hmm.
also do dance. We have a lot of dances in town here, even outdoor stuff now. Um, so anyway, to me, staying, fit and active is important, and I try and walk my talk as best I can. Although I still favor chocolate chip cookies when I can get one. So but you can't, you have to like be playful, not take things too seriously. I keep my child hearted self alive.
Good.
So. But I've written 11 books, John. I have a lot of books out, including this book, which I wrote all the way through all the way through the night. This is like a 1,200 page, Staying Healthy with Nutrition, that Celestial Arts 10-Speed produced, and we had a long talk about it because David Hines, who was my kind of main guy there, even though Phil Woods owned 10-Speed, I said, no, I think because I had written like 1,500 pages, and he said, I said, can we do this as a 3-volume set, He said, no, I think the time is right. This is 1992, it came out. The time is right. Let's do it as one book. And it was like 1,250 pages to start with. And it got really popular, and it got used by a lot of people studying nutrition. And, it's kind of scary, but it's so well organized. It was before I wrote it by hand on yellow pads.
Wow.
And by the time I paid somebody to input, this is like the beginning of computers, like the 88 maybe. I'm starting to work on it here. And I had spent probably $5,000-6,000. I said I could have bought 2 computers by then. So ever since then, I've been working on computers. But yeah, so that book, and I redid it again with a biochemist, nutritionist, about 10 years ago. So it's a popular book for nutrition students, and just it's a good reference book for people.
Mm-hmm.
And the detox thing, I've written a lot about food allergies and weight reduction and all that. And I have a bunch of other writing I'm doing, after the new medicine. I have a upcoming book called New Medicine Solutions. So it's dealing with how do we deal with many of the problems that Western medicine alone doesn't treat well, like the mood and energy disorders I talked about, aging and hormones, early diabetes, cardiovascular disease reduction and prevention. So there's a lot of things when we apply a natural medicine or even an Eastern medicine approach, we can kind of reduce these issues.
Well, we've covered pretty much the waterfront. I'm curious what your thoughts are. We mentioned the COVID epidemic and the whole germ warfare model that is being foisted on us. Nothing being said about checking your vitamin D levels, all of the things that we can do to improve our own resistance. Of course, Big Pharma doesn't want us to go there. They want to sell us drugs and vaccines.
Well, they're all looking at. Everybody's looking at vaccines as the answer, the end all be all, and that's, to me, I mean, they've been helpful. I had polio in 1952, so that was before the vaccine. My brother did too. So I realize the importance of vaccines, but what we've done, I talked about preventive medicine is more about how we live and not about more vaccines and even colonoscopies and all that, even though I support a lot of that. But I think, finding our path of what does it take to keep your body strong? I've been saying for 30, 40 years, healthy bodies don't get sick, at least very easily. So if you keep your body strong, in my understanding, causes of disease, in the center, I have a chart that's a whole page chart that has a whole chapter around it. In the center of where, to me, disease begins is cellular health. And the way the cells get unhealthy is a lack of nutrition, the deficiency of vitamins, minerals, amino acids, fatty acids, and the phytonutrients, bioflavonoids and carotenoids that are in all the natural foods. So when we have all those things going in, we have the potential to have functions okay. The other side is toxicity, and it may be more important, where chemicals, metals get into our air, food, water, or we put on our skin or do on our hair, and that starts to interfere with the cell function. So those issues, and then that leads to the secondary causes, which is infection, inflammation, immune issues, metabolic dysfunction. And then that leads to the circle of all the symptoms: headaches, allergies, digestive issues, heart disease, blah, blah, blah. So Western medicine treats from outside in. Healers, or you as an individual, ideally treat from inside out. So inside out is correcting what you're putting in your body and feeding yourself better and doing what I have. I have a free class, a free review on my website, elsonhaasmd.com. But a review, it deals with what I call the 5 keys to staying healthy: good nutrition, balanced exercise, proper sleep, learning to manage stress, and a healthy attitude. So I work a lot with people on attitude. And if we come to COVID, as we can kind of complete here, John, is like, our attitude is one that really is important. If we live in fear, That's an issue. We need to work on our immune health. I'm a fan of Bill Maher. I watch his show, and he usually comes out at the end with like, I cannot believe this is just said the other night. I cannot believe all these doctors are talking about the vaccine or what drug can use. Why isn't anybody talking about healthy nutrition? If you can heal a town of obesity by getting people to get off processed foods and eat real food and eat their vegetables and all that stuff, we will save lives. It's like doctors need to talk about nutrition, And when I started talking nutrition in 1975 and talk about juice cleansing, even, it was like, wackadoodle, it was like, but that's really, to me, what helps the body heal. When you have your tissues healthy, and the whole idea of the germ theory versus the terrain theory, your terrain is a state of your body health. So that's what we want to do to protect ourselves and support our immune system, is keep our body terrain, our body health, working right. And then we don't get sick, because I'm assuming that, if you get exposed to viruses, which we do every day, or bacteria or even parasites, a healthy immune system will get rid of those. If you get a big exposure, or maybe certain germs are virulent enough that even a healthy body might get sick, but rarely. I have had so many patients over the years that when they, drop a little weight, get to exercising, start eating better, they just don't get sick like they used to. I don't get sick anymore, So it's great. It's very rewarding, the kind of practice that I do. It's not as stressful. That's why I don't really look at retirement yet. I like working. I have a great team of people at Preventive Medical Center of Marin in San Rafael, and I love working with everybody. And it really, we support our community, and we get supported. So it's good. It's a good thing.
Great. That's a great summation, Elson. I'm going to end the recording now, and thank you.